Okay, good morning again, everybody. You could open your Bibles to Psalm 121, and we've had this weekend planned for quite some time, kind of between series. We finished up the End is Near series, getting ready to start next week with our Christmas season, the Advent series, and we pegged this as just a Sunday of celebration, church family stuff, people affirming their faith in water baptism, people affirming their faith in new membership, and celebrating the short-term mission. That's just been what we've slated for quite some time, and it's just a beautiful day. I'm glad that you get to be a part of it, especially if you're a guest with us. Glad that you get to see the church in action, right here in this building. Kids, out in the community, it's all really important stuff, and we get to be a part of what God's doing, right? Okay, and we get to be a part of what God is doing, right? Yeah, good. Yeah, sorry that I have to prompt you like that. Probably won't have to do that to the people in the second gathering. Yeah, they'll probably get right on it. Hey, so Psalm 121, where will we be on this Thanksgiving weekend? And I don't know, it seems like, I know for me it's true, but maybe this is true for you as well, that it's hard to ask for help. Is it hard to ask for, think about that. Do you, when you have a need, it's difficult to ask somebody to help you. This is something that, I don't know, maybe just my upbringing, maybe whatever you want to call it, my maleness. Maybe it's hard for females as well, I don't know entirely. But it's hard to say, would you help me? It's hard to admit that we need help. I had a friend I connected with. I hadn't spoken with him for several years. He called me the other day, and his girls now are young ladies. But when we lived in the same community, his youngest daughter was like 4 years old, and she had this little phrase that she would use. She would say, like if she's fumbling trying to tie her shoes or whatever, and you tried to help her, she would say, "I can do it my own self." And it feels a lot like kind of like a human mantra. I can do it my own self. I can do it myself flows off the tongue easier than would you help me? Right? And for me, I think I'm growing in this. But it's actually my wife is somebody who has taught me this. Of course, honestly, she has taught me more about how to be faithful to Jesus than any other human being in my whole life. And even though there's lots of other people that are helping me grow up in my faith, she's taught me a great deal. And I'm getting to the place where I can ask for help. But it's hard. But here's where we're going to be this morning in Psalm 121. This is this Thanksgiving weekend, right? And so we're going to encounter somebody in this, the author, which we don't even know who it is, in this psalm, who is asking for help with enthusiasm. He's pretty eager about it, and maybe we can learn something from that. But I think one of the things that we learn from that is that he's eager to ask for help because he knows who his helper is. And because he knows who his helper is, it's easier for him. So if you're familiar, and again, it's important as we study that we get a little bit of context. If you're familiar with Psalm 121, it's just 8 verses, and we'll work through all 8 of them. But it's it's a segment of the Psalms known as the Songs of Ascent. And so that's Psalm 120 through Psalm 134. So 15 Psalms that Israelites would use in their yearly routines. There were several times a year where they had to, wherever they lived, they would make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem where the temple was, and it was very much a part of their worship. And so as they made their way to Jerusalem and to the temple, they would use these songs of ascent as a way to tell one another the goodness of God, and as a way of worshiping God as they made their way. And they're called songs of ascent because Jerusalem is built upon a hill and the temple is also built upon a hill. So they would literally ascend the hill to the temple, and they would use these psalms as a way of doing that. One of the things that we would recognize in this also is that our psalmist isn't alone. So he is not making a solo pilgrimage to be a true worshiper. He's joining in with the other people kind of like our new members have chosen to do, right? They're not saying, I'm following Jesus and it's a solo venture. That's actually nowhere in the Bible, and so that's good. So these new members are smart about that. But it's the recognition that if I'm following Jesus and you're following Jesus, that means we're following Jesus together, shoulder to shoulder, and our duty to one another is to encourage one another in our faith, and that's what these people did. As they're making the pilgrimage, they would use these psalms to tell one another the truth, to remind one another of the goodness of God, and this is what we get in Psalm 121. So this author here, he's talking to the people around him as he's ascending, and this is what he says. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore. Let's pray. God, thank you for your word. Thank you for the testimony that you built and inspired in this person who wrote this psalm. May it be our testimony. Grow us in grace this day. Amen. So what we see here in these short 8 verses is that that this is a journey these people are taking, and there's a comparison being made to life. Life is a journey, if you will, and the journey that they're taking is certainly a physical journey. They're traveling from whatever town or village they lived in, and they're making a physical journey to Jerusalem and to the temple. But we would recognize that this is not just a physical journey. This is a spiritual journey that they're taking. It is with the intent not just to go from one place to the other. It's with the intent of ascending the hill and worshiping God as the one true God who made heaven and earth. And that's not unlike our journey. There's a lot of people in life, friends, who they are not, like, they haven't maybe thought about it deep enough, or it's not at a level, their thinking isn't at a level where they're recognizing it on a regular, like, true cognitive basis, where they're not, in their minds, they're just like taking a physical journey. Life is like a physical journey from birth to death. And it's a journey for them, but it's just physical. But that's not actually what life is all about. It is a physical journey without a doubt, but more importantly, it is a spiritual journey. We are all taking a spiritual journey. And so this psalm helps us kind of work through that in this sense, that we gain great confidence on the journey when we know who God is in the journey. Okay, so let's go back to verses 1 and 2 and begin to work through this, as is our practice. I love, he begins in this way. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? And then he answers his question. Now remember, he's talking with the people around him. And he's shoulder to shoulder with these guys and these women and these children. And they're conversing. And he says, I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. The first thing that we see here is, for this guy as well as for us, that our God is a sure source of help. The question that he asks is to set up for the answer. He's not wondering where his help comes from. He's saying these things so as to provoke an answer in the hearts of those who are listening to him as well. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Now, at a surface level, when we read that, we're not actually sure whether he is saying, I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? Is he saying that the hills are a place of danger, and so I need help from that? Or is he saying the hills are a place of refuge, and that's where I can run. We're not actually sure as we look at this. It's about all the information we have. But if we look at one of the other songs of ascent, Psalm 125, it kind of gives us a little bit of an indication of what he means. Psalm 125 verse 2 says, "As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people from this time forth and forevermore." So when in Psalm 121 he says, "I lift up my eyes to the hills," Psalm of Ascent, Psalm 125, "As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people, both now and forevermore." Similar language, right? Even that last line is the very last line in Psalm 121. So it is as if he's provoking the people around him to think deeply and say, we lift up our eyes to the hills. There's these mountains that surround Jerusalem. And he's saying, as you see the mountains surrounding Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people. So here, when he lifts up his eyes to the hills, he's lifting up his eyes to the Lord. And he's saying, where does my help come from? To this one to whom I've lifted up my eyes. He is the one who brings me help. From where does my help come? He's ascending this hill leading up to Jerusalem and the temple. And he wants his desire, like all the rest of his pilgrims, his desire is to be a true worshiper. His desire is to honor God rightly, to acknowledge God for who he is, and to live his life in a way that reflects that honor and that glory. But he has a need. But we don't even know what his need is. Where does my help come from? We can only guess as to what's going through his mind. Because he's a human being, and as a human being, there's no doubt things are going on in life that he is like, I did not sign up for this. I did not see this coming. I don't like this. I don't want this. I wish it would just go away. Right? Probably every single person in this room could say, that's true of me. If you're somebody who, like the psalmist, desires to be a true worshiper, and yet it seems like the things that go on in life are almost a distraction from allowing us to honor God rightly. And we've got to gain a little bit different perspective there. He's ascending this hill. He wants to be a true worshiper, but he has needs, or at least a need, and we're not told what it is. Maybe it's something personal. The people around him maybe don't even know what his need is. Maybe it's something going on in his family. And maybe the people around him do know what it is. Possibly his business is struggling, and it's got him all stirred up. Maybe he's sick, or maybe somebody that he cares deeply about is sick. Maybe there's something going on in his community, or maybe there's just something in society in general that just has him a bit tied up. We don't really know. And I think we don't know because we're not supposed to know. What we are supposed to see, though, is that he needs help, and he knows where to find that help. He teaches us something by way of his own testimony. When he needs help, he lifts up his eyes to the hills, to this God who is the maker of heaven and earth. So, when you find yourself in need, what do you do? Like, what is your go-to reaction? For some of you, it might be that you look down. You see a need, you feel you have a need, maybe something like what I described before. Maybe it's something personal, maybe it's something in your family. Maybe it's causing stress or fear, anxiety, all those super fun emotions that we get to experience when we have needs. And for some, maybe your natural reaction is to look down. You look down and you get sad And you start to, I don't mean this insultingly at all, but it's some of us, we start to pout. And we think, woe is me. And you just look down. And you slow down. And your enthusiasm drains right out the bottom of the tank. And you're just like, what am I supposed to do now? And you just don't even feel like getting out of bed. Some of you watching online this morning, I just described your day. Right? No offense. But when you have a need, where do you look? Some of you look within. You were taught as a child that you have to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, that it depends on you. You got to help yourself. So you look within and you talk to yourself and you're like, hey, you better buck up, man. You better take care of business, lady, right? But the psalmist does something different. He doesn't look down. He doesn't look within. He looks up. See, he wants to be a true worshiper. And he, probably like us, it's not super easy for him to ask for help. But he's learned something about God, that God is a sure source of help, and that he's reliable, and that he can count on him. And so he does what now for him is natural as a person of faith. He doesn't look down, he doesn't look within, he looks up, because he knows that's where his help comes from. My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. And he's recognizing God, of course, as the creator, as the sustainer. But he knows this about God, that as the creator and sustainer, he has displayed his unlimited power. He has displayed his incredible attention to detail. And he has displayed his care over all of creation. And so he looks up to this God who is the one who made heaven and earth. Other psalms use this same language. Psalm 124, verse 8, our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. Psalm 46, verse 1, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. To help here is to provide for somebody who has a need who cannot provide it for themselves. Right? It's the same word used to describe Eve when she was created from and for Adam as a helper. She came alongside. God created her to come alongside the man because he had a need that he couldn't meet himself. And so he needed help. And boy, don't we. So this first psalm, this first stanza, these first couple of verses teach us that God is a sure source of help for us. Let's move to the next couple of verses. Verses 3 and 4. His testimony continues as he's talking with his fellow pilgrims. He, this Lord, who's the maker of heaven and earth, will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. So in the first set, we see that God is a sure source of help. Here we see that our God is an ever watchful guardian. He's a sure source of help, and he's an ever watchful guardian. He continues to add to his personal testimony on this journey. Notice in the language he moves from my to your. Where does my help come from is what he says first. Now he says he will not let your foot be moved. He's drawing from wisdom literature, right? The Psalms are part of that wisdom literature where it's a constant communication by way of metaphor that life, this journey of life, is like walking a path. We're walking the path of life. And he says he will not let your foot be moved as you walk this path of life. And sometimes, as we know, the path is flat and safe and smooth and like we're just cruising along. Seems pretty great. And then all of a sudden the path changes. The terrain all changes, sometimes without warning. And it gets really steep. And it gets really treacherous. But regardless of what the path is like for you in the moment, you are assured, we are assured that God, this one who is maker of heaven and earth, is with us. And he is ever watching over us, and he will not let us fall. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. We get some of this same language in Jude 24 in this New Testament little letter known as Jude. He says in his closing, "Now to him who is able to keep you from falling, to keep you from stumbling, and to present you blameless before the presence of his glory with great joy." He's giving accolades to God, praise to God, because he's able to keep you from stumbling and to present you blameless before his presence. This is the work of God. So often we think it's actually we who are doing that work, but that's not the communication that we get in this. It should be a relief to us to know that God is the one who keeps us, and it is not we who are keeping ourselves. That's the gospel. Psalm 73, the author there is a man named Asaph, and he makes this confession that at one point in his life, it says that his feet had almost stumbled, and that his steps had nearly slipped. He got his eyes off of the Lord, and he started looking at other people, and jealousy for him settled in, and he says that in this path of life, he was almost stumbling, almost slipping because of that, and then, wisely, he gathered with other people in temple worship, and it was in the midst of that sanctuary in that temple that he gained a different perspective, and he recovered. God helped him to recover. This ever watchful guardian, watching over his servant Asaph. And the same is true for us as well. He will not let your foot be moved. It does not all depend on you. That's good news, friends. That's good news. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. And then he says this, "Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep." To keep is to watch over, to guard, to attend to carefully. So he uses this idea that God does not slumber, he does not sleep. And as most of us would probably easily admit that we need sleep. Some need more than others, but we all need sleep. And there's no sense of shame like, boy, I just hate to admit I have to sleep regularly. Right? And as easy as it is for us to admit that we need sleep, the better we know God and we understand who all of this depends on, us versus him, the easier it is for us to admit that we need help. Right? As easy as it is for us to admit that we need sleep, we should admit that we need help. Because we know who our God is. He does not slumber. Then he uses this picture where he talks about Israel as a nation, right? This corporate entity, and the God who keeps Israel as a corporate entity is committed to keeping you as an individual. The Lord is your keeper, is where he goes in the next set of verses, verse 5 and verse 6. So the one who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. Verse 5, the Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. So we've seen that God is this sure source of help, and he's this ever watchful guardian, but he's personally committed. Number 3 is our God is personally committed to this. Here the psalmist, again, remember, he's talking with his fellow pilgrims, and he's talking to them about how God is this ever watchful guardian, and he's watching over Israel to keep Israel. But then he turns it to this very personal side of things, and he's looking at his fellow pilgrims eye to eye, and he says, the Lord is your keeper. And I feel like maybe that's a little bit of, on this Thanksgiving weekend, a little bit of my responsibility this morning as a brother in Christ to you, as a brother or a sister in Christ. Especially for those of you that are unsettled by life right now. The Lord is your keeper. Let that resound in your soul until it settles down. The Lord is your keeper. So that when you ask yourself the question, where does my help come from? You can easily answer it. My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. Right? The Lord is your keeper. And when we see this in the Old Testament, the word Lord spelled out in all caps, it's the Hebrew word Yahweh. It's not communicating a title for God. It's communicating his personal name. Yahweh is the covenant-keeping God who has committed himself to the well-being of those who belong to him. He's personally committed to those who belong to him. And as your keeper, we get this real poetic language that, like all good poetry, you have to scratch your head a little bit, think, and go, what is being said right now? Right? As your keeper, he is your shade on your right hand. The watchful presence of God acts as a protective shade for his people. Of course, we're not talking only in a physical sense here. We're talking about a spiritual sense here. We have similar language in Psalm 91. In the Amplified Bible, Psalm 91 verse 1 reads like this: He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall remain stable and fixed under the shadow of the Almighty, whose power no foe can withstand. We get this sense, this poetic, the shade that we get in these poetic words here. There's this sense of relief. There's this sense of rest. You can rest under the shadow of the Almighty. He is your keeper. He is your shade at your right hand. And as your shade, notice, as your shade, the sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. Well, the meaning of that is obvious. You read that, stop for a moment and go, say that again? What does that mean? The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. I think there's the possibility of a couple things being said here. First, there's this literary device that this psalm uses several times, actually, and we see it in other parts of the Bible. We see it out in general literature as well, called a merism, figure of speech that takes two contrasting things or two things at polar extremes, and by communicating them both at the same time, it's basically saying he's covering everything. So here we get this the sun and the moon, the day and the night. That's a merism, right? So basically, he's saying that God is your protective covering all day and all night, all the time. He is an ever watchful guardian who's personally committed to you. So I think we could take it in that sense. The Lord is your keeper all day and all night, constantly, continually, because he does not slumber or sleep. Another way we could take this is this, it could be, so there's this reference to the sun and the moon. And of course we're familiar with the effects of the sun, in some ways the negative effects of the sun. Like even back in these days, they were familiar with sunstroke. You have to be careful, especially in this climate. You could get sunstroke. So that's a real thing, right? But what is this about the moon? The moon shall not strike you by night. And so there's this superstition. So while sunstroke is a real thing, being moonstruck is superstitious. There's really no such thing as being moonstruck. To be moonstruck often is related to being in love. But generally speaking, it just means you're not thinking straight. You're not thinking logically, rationally. You're moonstruck. Kind of temporarily stupid. Like, who hasn't been moonstruck, right? You're like, that's not superstition. I know people, right? But here's where I'm going with this. The idea is that having sunstroke, to be struck by the sun, that actually is a real thing that we should be concerned about. And the Lord is your shade at your right hand, so that the sun will not strike you by day. He is your keeper, so he's keeping you from real things, from real danger and from real fears. But then this idea of being moonstruck is not real. It's superstition. But if you believe a superstition, it can really mess you up, can't it? So while he can keep you from real, actual, rational fears, he also can keep you from irrational fears. Things that aren't real, but you think they're real. And how often do we allow ourselves to get turned inside out because of things that we just think could happen? So, I think this is what the psalmist is communicating. As our keeper, the Lord keeps us from real danger and from things that we just think are danger. That brings us to our last couple of verses, where he says, the Lord will keep you. Again, he's continuing in that theme. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore. So here, we see that our God is comprehensively faithful. This is the language of these last two verses. He's comprehensively faithful. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. This word evil here means that which causes harm or destruction or misfortune. And I don't know about you, but I come to this portion of the psalm and I'm like, let's just preach through verses 1 through 6. Let's leave this alone because this is hard to reconcile with real life. That happens on a regular basis, right? Teachers and preachers of the Bible avoid major portions of the Bible because they don't want to do the hard work of trying to make sense out of it. And so they're just like, let's just stick with the first 6 verses. Those feel good. Anybody else? You with me? Okay, what is this? The Lord will keep you from all evil. Evil here meaning harm, destruction, or misfortune. How are we supposed to process that? How are we supposed to comprehend that in the midst of a pandemic? In the midst of massive flooding across our region? In the midst of what many people think is a majorly overreach on the part of our government? How do you comprehend that? How do you make sense of that with a cancer diagnosis? Or when you're facing divorce? Or when habitual sin just won't go away? Or with the loss of a child? Or when a loved one becomes an addict? We could keep going, friends. The list just keeps going. How do we comprehend verse 7 in the midst of the life that we have to live right now? Oh, someday in heaven it will be wonderful, but what about right now? Is this true? That's kind of hard, isn't it? Verse 7 invokes this brokenness in our world. It invokes this universal question of why, if there is a God, right? If there is a God, who hasn't asked that question at some point in their life? I don't mean in a silly way. I actually had somebody say to me, because they were disappointed that it rained on the 4th of July during a family reunion, this is what they said to me: how could there be a God if he would let it rain on the 4th of July? I'm like, let's not talk. I can't talk to you right now. Right? You know what I'm saying? It's just like some of those why questions are really like, come on. Seriously? But some of the real why questions, good grief, right? How do we make sense of this? If God is our helper and God is our keeper, why the injustice? Why the sorrow? Why the pain? If we're going to be true worshipers like this psalmist is striving to be, then we can't just go, let's just leave verse 7 alone. Let's just pretend like that doesn't exist. But that's not honest, right? So I don't have, God is comprehensively faithful, but I don't have a comprehensive answer. We strive to give a reasonable answer to these things, but it isn't in any way to whitewash the real, true pain that we experience in this life. But let me offer you a few thoughts in this way. If God is our helper and our keeper, why the injustice, why the sorrow, why the pain? Well, I think first we could say that his promise to keep us isn't to be understood carte blanche, meaning unconditionally. Meaning that we don't get to live reckless lives and expect God to keep us from the natural consequences of our own idiocy. Even though I think he does that more than we're aware. I know that's true for my life. Right? So that's the first thing. It's not the only thing, but that's the first thing. His promise isn't to be understood as this unconditional promise that we can just go out and live recklessly and expect that he's going to keep us from natural consequences. Secondly, his promise to keep us is to be understood in light of his sovereignty. By his supreme power and his authority and his unlimited knowledge, which we have very limited knowledge, by his sovereignty over all things, God works together for good all things, according to his purpose. But we're so limited in our ability to comprehend that. The Bible is replete. It is filled with examples of evil being superintended by God for his glory and for the good of other people, including ourselves. We got this great example from the story of Joseph in the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, who was treated very poorly by his brothers. For years, he suffered because of their evil. And yet, when confronted, Joseph, after working through all of that, says to his brothers, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, to the saving of many lives." We get this example in the book of Acts. Jesus told his disciples, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel, and people will receive him as Lord and Savior and have eternal life." And what does God use to get his church into all the world? Persecution. Massive persecution. And he's at work, bringing it all together for the good of them that love him. And the most glaring example of this is the cross itself. What was done to the Lord Jesus leading up to the cross and his crucifixion was pure evil. And yet, God worked it together for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. So, his promise to keep us is got to be understood in light of his sovereignty. He is all-powerful, he has all knowledge, and, friends, he has all authority, so he can superintend things. So here's how I would say this. What we experience as evil and harm, evil or harm, catch me now, what we experience as evil or harm wouldn't be experienced if God wasn't sovereignly working it together for good. You and I do not experience random acts of evil or harm or misfortune. The Lord is our keeper. And because he is our keeper, anything that would fall under the definition of evil here, harm, destruction, or misfortune, anything like that we perceive, at least initially, as evil, the only reason we're experiencing that is not randomly, but because God is sovereign and he is superintending it. Somehow for good. And some of it maybe we'll see in this life, and others we won't see in this life. But this life is not all there is. And somehow we have to grasp that. That's my third offer of counsel in this way. How do we make sense out of it? If God is our helper and our keeper, why the injustice, why the pain, why the sorrow? It is this, his promise to keep us is to be understood in light of eternity. In the midst of the evil of this world, he is keeping our lives, not just the physical life here, but our eternal lives. Most importantly, our eternal lives. Our God is comprehensively faithful, friends. This is what our last verse says. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forever. Again, part of kind of a merism, right? He will keep you here and he will keep you there. He will keep you presently and he will keep you eternally. The Lord's guardianship extends over all of our lives, over all adversities. It is comprehensive. He is comprehensively faithful. So our big idea this morning, the ever-present God is our ever-present help. The life that we live it is a physical journey, but more importantly, it's not just a physical journey, it's a spiritual journey. And like the psalm tells us, we're meant to ascend. As they ascended to Jerusalem and to the temple, we are to ascend. Our lives are to be ascending, not descending. It's really easy. We don't need a whole lot of help to descend. But we do need help to ascend. And the ever-present God is our ever-present help. And this psalm communicates a strong confidence that I hope on this Thanksgiving weekend will bolster your faith in God's ability and his willingness to help you, because he is a sure source of help. He is your ever watchful guardian. He is personally committed to you, and he is comprehensively faithful to you. So let's bow in prayer. Ways to respond. Ways to respond, let me offer a few as suggestions. First, truly take time to thank the Lord for being your keeper and your helper. And affirm your trust in him, even when you can't draw straight lines in all of this. For those of you that do not know Jesus as your Savior, recognize that God's greatest help is in Jesus providing salvation for you. That God showed his love for you while you were still sinning against him, in that Christ died for you. So put your trust in Jesus today. Some of you know that every month this year I've been putting out a memory verse, memorizing it myself and challenging anybody in the church who wants to memorize it also. I would encourage you, this will be our memory verse for the month of December. I would encourage you to memorize Psalm 121 and allow God to bring that to your memory on a regular basis. He is your keeper. He is your help. He's ever present, ever watching over you. So here's how I want to end this. If you were to admit it, remember it's hard to admit that you need help. I get that. We all get that. But if we were to admit it, where would you say you need help right now? Where would you say you need help right now? And as soon as you've thought of it, I want you to stand up. I'm not going to ask you to say where you need help, but I want to pray for you. Where would you say you need help right now? And as soon as you've thought of it, just stand up. It might be something personal. It might be for somebody else. But what came to mind? You might just glance around, right? It's pretty universal. We need help in so many ways. And here's what I would say in prayer. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore. Lord God, we stand together in this place. We stand together, but each one of us have individual needs that we're counting on you, God, for. Thank you that you are personally committed, that you are that ever-present help. You are that sure source of help. So today, Lord, we stand and ask for your help. And let us be attentive, knowing that you're going to bring that help. Let us be attentive and careful to give you thanks as it comes. And Lord, help us to learn not just in this moment, but for our whole lives. For our whole lives. That you are ever present and an ever present help. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Remain standing. Let's sing this final song and then we'll be dismissed. God bless you.